people is an anomaly,
Yeah.
right? It is something that is abnormal. So for the last 4 years, we had some challenges that are going on. That, you know what? There's actually smart people around the world and smart people in the United States, voters in the United States that go, wait a minute, we can't continue to have what we had right now. There's too many people getting hurt, whether on any side of the spectrum, on any part of the economic spectrum.
Hmm.
And a president that's telling the truth as opposed to the 20,000 plus lies that I guess political factors happen with President Trump. But we also need to talk about how do we help people as opposed to trying to divide people. And I think that this is that kind of ticket. And again, as you said, Charlie, it makes us all feel good to say, wait a second, there's some positive things that can happen. And we just need to get engaged and involved and make sure that we get everybody out to vote on election day.
You know, and isn't that the basic idea of politics? Is to sort of get people a little bit together on the same page, and we don't agree with everything everybody has to say. You don't like her brand of national health care, okay, but it's better than the alternative, and so you kind of everybody kind of gets 75% together, and there's a possibility of moving forward. And I sensed from the Twitter messages that have been booming through my phone all day, or at least the last couple hours, that there's a broad sense that, I mean, I heard people saying things like, I finally stopped weeping for joy at about 6 o'clock so that I could send my friends a note about Kamala Harris. Listen, they're going to raise a bucket of money off of this announcement. It seems to be going very well. I hope it's ticking in the right direction. Let me pivot over to something else. You are the Deputy County Executive of Westchester County. Ken Jenkins, please tell me some basic facts about coronavirus in Westchester right now.
Well, the basic facts in Westchester and New York State around coronavirus is that we are continuing to follow the instructions of the scientists and the professionals, making sure that we're wearing masks in public, in places where we can't social distance, trying to keep those celebrations and groups down below 50, and making sure that we're social distancing and doing all the things, hand washing and frequent hand washing, sanitizing, and that kind of thing. And we've made some tremendous sacrifices here in Westchester as we started with on March 3rd, the first coronavirus case that was in the United States, and started from that place in New Rochelle, and continuing on with the first restricted area, with the containment area that we first had in New Rochelle, and to where we are today. There's a lot of people that have made tremendous sacrifices to get us to where we are, and we're in great shape from a Westchester County perspective. I believe that when we looked at the numbers today, they were flat. So we got to a particular point where we're at about 0.3% people testing positive. We're still testing, tens of thousands of people in Westchester today. We've tested almost half of our Westchester population, and that number, could get skewed because people have taken multiple tests. But we've had over 425,000 people tested in Westchester County, and that puts us in a good place to be where we are with the next steps, which is going to be school opening and that kind of thing. And the county has been a clearinghouse of those kind of activities. Certainly, our Department of Health is responsible from the state level. They're an arm of the state, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to manage things with contact tracing and testing, and being able to help our schools get into a place of being able to present their plans to open. But again, we don't control that. We're just helping to assist in that. And the
Right.
county has been, and it's different from our presidential and federal levels. We kind of tell people when we don't know information. County Executive Latimer and all of our team has been out trying to assist people and talk to people and tell them facts and say, you know what, this is what we know. Here's what the process is, and it's changed several times. We had a situation in the beginning where we would say things like you had to get tested twice
Mm-hmm.
in a 2 week period, not within 24 hours, to be able to get off of isolation. Now it's the CDC recommendation, which is 7 days, 3 days without fever-reducing medication, and then you're on the honor system and moving forward. That can't be the case for our schools. It's a little bit different, and that's some challenges, and I'm sure we'll talk about that some more.
Well, so let me just kind of understand the governmental nuts and bolts of this. Our Westchester County government operates a health department. what is the job of the Westchester County Health Department? Give me, so like, what are some of the titles that exist there, and what do they do, and how does it fit into the coronavirus information dissemination process? Is there decision making, or is it basically a conduit for information from the state, CDC? What do you, because my impression
it's actually a combination of both. All right, so we have the direct responsibility for infectious diseases like coronavirus. So whether it's and people should recognize we do this a lot. You know, whether it's with measles in schools or tuberculosis or hepatitis. You know, that kind of things that the health department has done for many years, and contact tracing is one of those things. But what we do from our health department is we take our directives from the county health department, Dr. Shalita Amler and her team, Dr. Dr. Walt, there's a bunch of folks that are over there that are doing a fantastic job, and that they first started with being an arm of the state. Mm-hmm. So the state health department, Dr. Zucker, the State Department of Health issues guidelines, and then we execute those guidelines. So whether it's for contact tracing or testing, we are the ones that make those decisions. And Dr. Emlin and her folks go out, and they were doing the initial set of tests, going to people's houses when we were in the early stages, you know, full PPE and that kind of thing, which was slow. And, you know, we ramped up testing to where we had the drive-in testing site, the first one on the East Coast. Yeah. And again, we don't manage it. We just have the information, and then we disseminate that information. So we're a clearinghouse of information. We're an ability to help to provide resources as far as a resource person. And then the Emergency Operations Center for us was where we coordinated all those requests for PPE, et cetera, to be able to get food to people, et cetera. One of the other things that the county health department is responsible for is isolation of individuals that were in this case. So we actually had someone in February, which people forget now, but we had a person that had traveled to Wuhan, China, and they could not isolate at home, and the county is responsible for making sure that people can isolate at home. So there's many different facets of it, but that's where we are.
Got it. So let me ask you a couple of interpersonal questions. I went to the Glen Island Testing Center a few weeks ago. I was having a symptom. I was worried, so I got a test. Very efficient, very organized. It took between 5 and 6 days to get the results, but I got them. Is that those tents that I saw down there, are they operated by the Westchester County Health Department? What's your role specifically? Because I know it's a county park.
They're operated by New York State. So the Glen Island site in New Rochelle is as a drive-in testing site, and the 2 walk-in sites and that site up in northern Westchester, those are all managed by New York State, except for the Westchester Medical Center, which is run by the medical center, but it's paid for by the state. So we did not operate that. It's in our park, obviously, in Glen Island, and we gave them that facility. We also licensed them. We came to an agreement for them to use the county center to make that a hospital, which 120 rooms that they built in 4 weeks. And, you know, at a cost for the state, I guess the federal government pays for that, so somewhere north of $40 million. So we don't operate any of those, but we have the facilities to do that. So the drive-in testing that you said, we would get those results that get funneled through the statewide system. So it's one system, and that's one of the things that people were confused about. So it's one system, and those results come through the same system. So no matter where you live, it gets to the proper department. And if you had tested positive, then we would go through the steps of letting you know. And sometimes we know, let you know before the doctors themselves have an opportunity.
Time out.
Yep.
So for a couple of things. One, thankfully, I was negative. But if I was if I was positive, are you saying that I would have received a phone call from the Westchester County Health Department?
So in the early stages, you would have received a call from the Westchester County Health Department.
Hang on 1 second.
The nurses themselves were doing that.
3 seconds, Ken.
Sure.
Yep, I'm with you. Go ahead.
So you would have got a call from the Westchester County Health Department.
Yep.
As we ramped up, then you started getting calls from a state center, a state call center, and then now we have calls that you might get from a contact tracer if you had tested positive.
Got it.
You know, we also had the antibody testing. The county executive and I, as you know, were out and about from March 3rd when there was the area that was the confinement area in New Rochelle, but they didn't say you needed to stay off the street. It wasn't social distancing and that kind of thing. So we were out and about and from that day, there were several of us that thought that we might have been impacted without system being asymptomatic, right? Like you said, you had some of the symptoms, but some of them feel like a cold, right? Or your body's
It's
sore,
exactly what
you lose
happened.
a sense of smell.
Yeah.
There's a ton of things. So I know personally, I also did the antibody test to ensure that I hadn't been exposed because I knew I wasn't sick. But again, we all did those kind of tests, and as you said, that turned out negative for you and for me as well. And I just swore that being around and doing all the things that the county executive and I were doing, that we had to be exposed somewhere, and that didn't happen. So again, this is the challenge with this particular virus, that there's not a set of circumstances. If somebody is sick and you see the symptoms, well, that's one set of things. And then we found out there's asymptomatic people
Hmm.
that are carrying things, and they could be super spreaders. That wasn't the case for our initial index patient, as we like to call them, as the technical term is. But we keep working through these together.
It's complicated. I'm glad you're on
Hmm.
top of it. So, what is that tent-like structure across the street from the county center? What goes on inside that building? It's
Well,
like a,
right now, nothing. Right, those things. That is a full hospital facility. So those are hospital beds, ICU level beds, all of them with respirators. There's 125 or so rooms between inside the county center and then outside in the three tents that are outside, that are ready at the snap of a finger for us to have folks come in.
and that
And
place is
remember,
empty right now?
it's empty and it's guarded, but it is empty right now. There was a set of time when the Westchester Medical Center was running the antibody test that I referred to earlier,
Yeah.
where people, where the state wanted to make sure to continue to do testing. They did some samples around Westchester County when they went to different places,
Right.
and they did the finger pricks for folks, and determined that there was a set of people that had the antibodies, and that's when they ramped up the testing facility. But again,
Yeah.
it's a full hospital. That inside the county center and in those tents, I would dare say are better than some of the hospitals that we have. I won't name any.
Well, look, I hope to God we never need them, but I'm awfully glad that they're there. I want to switch to another topic. We had a storm last week. We had thousands of people without service to their homes and apartments and work, and my God, it's a mess. So, does the county have any sort of leverage over Con Edison to get them to do a better job at recovering from these situations? Because it's really feeling like there's an accountability problem, Ken.
Well, something that's really frustrating for all of us. I mean, when we first came into office, and that's County Executive Latimer and our team, the third day we had a snowstorm, and then we had the nor'easter that people really recall, when with the county executive, basically laid out the county officials and said somebody needed to be terminated, somebody needed to be fired, but because of their response. The challenge in this thing was, one, I was in the office with the county executive, and we were looking out the window, and you see the rain whipping around, et cetera. And, it came through very quickly. So people didn't expect the level of damage that Mother Nature can,
Right, but I
put
think
their hand out.
can
Right?
I think everybody understands force majeure. Everyone understands act of God. But these acts of God are getting closer and closer together. They're getting more severe. Every 2 years or 3 years, we get a 65-mile-an-hour wind that comes rolling through our neighborhoods. Windows break, doors
Yeah.
break, lawn furniture goes all over the place. I mean, there's lids from my garbage cans, I think, are probably in another county right now.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
these things keep happening and they get closer together. So what I'm saying
So
is the
the
electric
biggest challenge
utilities, they need
again.
to get their act together. The cable companies,
So
they all have franchise agreements. They need to keep their services running. And if they can't withstand what Mother Nature is delivering, then maybe they don't need those franchise agreements.
So to answer your question about what can we do, with it was with NICEAG and with Con Ed. For us in Westchester, we have both of those services. NICEAG being more in the northeast portion of Westchester County. That we had a situation where the utility folks just flat out don't have enough people for the peaks, right? So someone framed it to me nicely, that said, they don't want to build the church for Christmas Day when you're going to have the most people, right? They're building it for the average. And unfortunately for us, is a balance. And quite honestly, again, Con Ed, was not able to have enough people on the ground. So one of the lessons learned from the Northeast is where they promised they were going to do $100 million worth of storm hardening. We're going to have to go through that and in the postmortem of this and see, did those folks actually do the $100 million worth of things that they said that they were going to do?
Let me ask
Clearly,
you this
again,
question.
people still don't have power.
Let me ask you this
and that's
question.
the problem.
Earlier in your career, I may not have perfect recall. Did you work for Verizon or the phone company?
Verizon.
You were. Thank you. Okay, so my recall is good. You worked for a utility. There was resources. It's a public company. You can buy stock in it. Con Edison, Verizon, these utilities, right? They are well capitalized organizations. They have the ability to build infrastructure that could withstand a 65-mile-an-hour wind. If they're not doing it, if they're not building the capacity, then they're not meeting their basic public trust that we've placed in them.
The issue in this, again, is so Con Ed did make some changes based on the United Westchester report. That was a report that was put together through all of the town mayors, supervisors, and city village mayors that came together after that incident in 2018. They had a full report. And again, kind of just did a rate case and said, we're going to be doing X, Y, and Z. So we got to go through that and see. I got to say a few different things. One, they were supposed to make sure that they had a local representative in each municipality. Yeah, they had that. It really doesn't matter if that utility representative that someone could talk to and says, hey, you know what, we got 6,000 people down. Where are we going? Who's going to go first, et cetera? Because then there's the priorities and people want to understand what those priorities are. They want to know where the Con Ed crews in the district. And again, there's such a combination. And that's when you asked the question about the county's coordination of that. In our emergency operations center, we help facilitate those conversations. And again, the biggest issue for Con Ed was communication on one level. And it wasn't, they didn't have text messaging. I know my power didn't go out. I did have things thrown around and tree limbs all over the place, but our power in Yonkers, my street didn't go out. And again, the challenge again for all of them is how do you communicate to people what's happening so that people can make adjustments in their life? They understand it was a problem, right. And if you tell them, you know what, your power is down, we have this amount of resources on the ground. They did have equipment staged in place where they were flying people in, right, from different places. Mm-hmm. But again, with COVID, the flights in Westchester, there's no commercial flights in Westchester County right now. So those folks were flying in other places, and they expect those folks on mutual aid to come from different communities, just like our fire departments.
Yeah, I've heard about. I've heard about this mutual aid.
So they need more people. They got to flat out. They need more people to be able to come up to this average, so that when there's a problem, that you can turn it around more quickly. The county executive proposed a utility reserve corps to be able to get out there and put individuals in place, give them training, and make sure that they're at the ready to help assist in these particular facilities, so you don't have to wait for people to get flown in.
We're not going to.
There's no question about it.
So your remarks are all focused on incident response, which absolutely is super important. The communications, the boots on the ground, the trucks, the people, mutual aid. I get it. My questions are more around the situational supply. So my argument, we're not going to get to the bottom of it tonight, and I want to get onto other topics, is we need to build up that infrastructure. We need to put more of these facilities underground. We need to build up the substations so that they can withstand the 65, 70-mile-an-hour wind, so we don't have the outage in the first place. And I know that that's a 25-year project, but that's where some of the infrastructure dollars need to go.
It's not just a 25-year project, though, Charlie. The other part of that, it's a 25-year project, and for doing underground wires, for example, it's $1 million a mile. Right, so you're looking at a $10 billion approximate project in Westchester County.
That's not as big a number as it used to be, Ken. $10 billion. That's nothing.
There's no question about that. But the issue is not the $10 billion cost; it's the $10 billion that they're going to charge us, right? Because that's really what happens. It's not that it's going to come out of the out of the out of the profits of the company, and I'm sure that there's going to be some of that,
Yeah.
but more than likely they're going to pass those costs on to us. And we live in Westchester, and we love the beautiful trees, et cetera. And I know that there's some people, again, that you look at those big, beautiful trees, and you're like, don't cut them down. And I remember this Con Ed argument when Con Ed wanted to clear cut stuff, and people were losing their mind about it. And it's like, nope, we can't have that happen. And now you have a storm like this happens, like cut down every damn tree on the block, right? So again, there's the balance to deal with that. But you're right. And there needs to be that discussion, because there's certain communities that always go down when the wind blows too hard. Those things, you make the investment and you put those wires underground in that community, and then you keep going. But there's universal, definitely going to be a lot of conversation to say, what do you do to harden and to continue to harden and make sure that you don't have certain things. We've been having the scenario that we've had the 100-year storm every year, right? So the 500-year storm every other year. So whatever planning that was done, and a lot of folks won't want to recognize this. When we had COVID and everybody stopped driving their cars and that kind of thing, we got much cleaner air, et cetera. Well, now we were up to our hurricane in July, right? So yeah, we're looking at a scenario where the weather is being adjusted based on, about global climate change and all those things. And again, the utility has to do that. And we're not even going to talk about the cable companies, because the first call that we had with Altice was yesterday, right? So it was almost a week later. And the first call, I'm talking about the municipalities. And that was not a pretty call, as you could imagine.
So
what's going on?
Time out. You are the deputy county executive of Westchester County, and it took you a week to get a meeting with a cable company to talk about why half their service area is out a week after a storm that lasted 6 hours.
I'm actually going to say the other way around. It took them a week before they set up a call with the municipalities to talk about them being out.
Right.
And in some of the cases, like Altice, they said, oh, well, people could use their app and they could call in or they could email in. Well, some municipalities in their franchise agreements don't have any other service but Altice or Verizon or Spectrum or one of those cases. So if you got no internet, you can't get out your house, you can't do anything. So how do you communicate to the company to say there's a problem? And then when you call and you spend hours on the phone, as some of the elected officials did on the phone, and no one's able to answer that question. And again, Altice, remember, it used to be Cablevision, and it got sold to Altice. And the question is, are they making the level of investments that are necessary to protect their customers? And trust me, again, when we go out on the street as deputy county executive, George Latimer County executive, every local official, people call and they see you in the street and they just start yelling, right? Like, I got a cable company in the back of the car to fix it. But they're frustrated and they're angry.
Of course.
And they need to talk to someone. And we got to, Altice, Verizon, Con Ed, and NYSEG all need to do better jobs. And they're going to be held to account about how they're going to make those investments.
That's what needs to happen. Memorial Field. Is that project going to get finished, Ken?
Absolutely. I'm going to quote my good friend, Mayor Sean Patterson Howard, who said that this is the last groundbreaking that we're going to do.
Okay.
Right. So
that's what the last guy said.
Lyndon Williams, Legislator Lyndon Williams, and I voted for Memorial Field. It was one of the first votes for him when he came on to the County Board of Legislators in 2009. I voted for that particular project. It came out of my committees about the government operations.
Yeah.
So it's going to get done. Somebody pointed out there's been 5 different mayors, 3 different county executives that have gone through this particular process. And as the county executive, George Latimer, said, it's not about who started, it's about closing. And Sean Patterson, Mayor Sean Patterson and him are the closing pitches, and it's getting done.
But now it's a county project, which means the big A is on you. So accountability, right? So what's the timetable on a completion? Spring?
Well, the timetable for completion was 12 months from when we started. So again, given some time for some activities to happen, we made it 18 months. So we're expecting that we're going to be able to have Razorback and Knights football on Memorial Field next year. So when I at the end of the press conference,
Okay, now time out. No, time out.
Yeah.
I need to parse that one out. So Razorbacks and high school football on Memorial Field in 2021. That season begins, but that season begins in October timeframe.
September timeframe. So
Okay.
September going into October. That the expectation is that we're going to have Mount Vernon Knights football back on Memorial Field for that time.
Pivot to party politics. So Westchester County Board of Legislators has 17 members, 16 of them are Democrats, 1 conservative. So I want to hear from somebody that really has spent a lot of time running for office, hanging around city committee meetings all over Westchester County. Can you kind of explain the tone and timbre of a county board of legislators? It's pretty much all Democrats. Is it really 2 Democratic parties? Are there 2 clubs now? How does that work?
Well, no, and I tell people this all the time, especially given the history of both the county executive and me, the deputy county executive, and our county attorney. I like to say the 3 of us are recovering legislators, right? And that is one of the advantages you see from the approach that County Executive Latimer has used throughout this process. It's a partnership, and whether it's with municipalities in Con Ed, or whether it's with municipalities with the coronavirus, or whether it's the County Board of Legislators versus that. County Executive Latimer's entire career was spent on the legislative side of the branch, which means you learn how to negotiate with people. You learn how to work with people, because you can't just take your hand and say, this is what's going to get done, right? So that means we have these conversations and we make sure we're working with everybody. So we look at the Board of Legislators as partners, right? And friends. And especially, as you said, because there's so many Democrats in that, but it doesn't matter for the county executive, no matter what community you're in. We look at the county government as partners, and we're siblings, right? So we might be an older brother, right?
Yeah, but it's not a county government question. It's a political party question. What does it mean to be aligned with a political party when you have a lot of people that are getting elected without the direct support of the party?
Well, you know something? In our cases, we really don't have that, at least on the County Board of Legislators, and we don't have that, again, with the county executive. We all had our party support in order to get through this particular process. So, again, so to answer your party question, the party is continuing to change and evolve. And for Democratic politics, as was Republican politics, it's a pendulum. Yeah. So, at one time, there were no Democrats on the County Board of Legislators, right? And all the Board of Supervisors at that time. And now you have 16 out of 17 members being registered Democrats, et cetera. So the conversations, as you're saying, is it's really talking about the issues of the day and making sure in Westchester, we're talking about the kind of issues that we're concerned about, and whether that's investing in social services, investing in mental health services, making sure that we're doing housing and fair and affordable housing throughout Westchester County, and taking care of all the kind of individuals, making sure that we have reentry programs for people that come out of the correctional facility. Those are conversations, and that's not a party base. That's a philosophical base. And again, from the structure question that I think that you're asking about, people that are winning that necessarily didn't have party support. Well, we had one of those, and certainly want to give congratulations to Congressman elect Jamal Bowman. He still has to go through the process in November, but again, it's a heavily Democratic district, and he's going to win. But we also want to turn around and say, wait, we got to continue to work with all of the voices that are at the table, and making sure that those energies come in there. And that's really the challenge. So
Jamal Bowman was on this show a few weeks ago. We had a very interesting actually, no, I take that back. He was on Westchester Eye on the Radio, which at the time we were broadcasting over the internet. But I interviewed him a few weeks ago. Interesting guy, and he's got a heck of a future coming as he makes his way into the halls of Congress. So last question, you had a vote a couple of I guess it was a week or two ago, on purchasing new voting machines on the County Board of Legislators, and there seemed to be a bit of a cleavage between the subgroups within the County Board of Legislators. There are 5 individuals there, I guess, that voted against this $6 million expenditure on new voting machines, and the balance carried the vote through. But there's some controversy there because there's a suggestion that maybe these voting machines are susceptible to a cybersecurity attack. How did they negotiate that, and then what happens on the other side of it?
Well, the truth is, again, the County Board of Legislators had a bond act in front of that to purchase machines, and people need to understand, again, the Board of Legislators in the county have a mandate to support the Board of Elections.
Yeah.
So the question that was in front of the Board of Legislators wasn't, do you like machine A or like machine B? The question in front of the Board of Legislators was, are you going to bond for these machines, or are you going to pay for them for cash? So people took that particular argument and had the other concerns that have been raised for many, many years from individuals that are out there, because they wanted the old lever machine. So they don't like any of the quote unquote hybrid voting machines.
So you're saying,
Bowman,
okay,
right?
Yeah. So you're saying a no vote.
No, I'm saying, so for the people that just went through the election, guess what? You voted on that hybrid machine, and you didn't have one candidate say, oh my God, I think my election was hacked, and that's why we lost, because the security and the cybersecurity issues that the people are bringing up are legitimate concerns. But unfortunately for us in Westchester County, and for the machines that the State Board of Elections adopted and approved and certified to be bought by the Board of Elections, because that's the only machines they can buy, the real argument that the people want to make is at the state level to have that conversation. But the fact is that all of us that went out and voted either early or in a polling place voted on those machines. And the hack that the individuals are talking about is a very, very specific thing with 960 different ballot faces. Somebody has to sit at the machine, plugged into the machine with a computer, to make a mark on a ballot that doesn't come out the machine, which means it's for the visually impaired that would be doing that particular thing. So it's not only unlikely to happen, but in addition to that, because we in New York, as opposed to other states, still have a paper ballot that goes into the machine, that you can have an audit of those things. And the marks are not going to be the same, because they're not the same kind of ink from inside and outside the paper. So let's say all of that actually could happen. You know what, when they do the recertification of votes, which they actually have they're going to do by law, but I know that there's some considerations for those closed votes for us doing that earlier. It's not a real issue. I think, again, that as you were trying to point out, Charlie, is that we're into an argument, and here's the real thing. On June 23rd, it was a debacle, right? There was 62 polling sites open in Westchester County when there used to be 363, right? The Board of Elections told that to the Board of Legislators when they said, we need to purchase these machines in May, and they would have gotten them in time to be able to open up at least 200 sites. The fact is, we cannot have that happen in November. So as I saw some folks out there talking about over the weekend in the social media world, you know, they might not wanted to vote that way. They would not have voted that way. But at the end of the day, we need to protect the election in November to make sure that we don't have people online until 1:30 in the morning in Westchester County.
So what you're saying,
right.
So what you're saying is, as a lot of these, difficult decisions come down, you find yourself in a corner where you have no great options, right? So you're saying one option was to not have enough voting machines, and then you have people waiting till midnight to vote, or maybe not being able to vote, and that raises other issues. Or you can meet this immediate need by buying $6 million worth of, or borrowing $6 million to buy a bunch of voting machines that may have a cybersecurity flaw, but it's risk versus reward. I don't think there's a simple answer, but there are some very complicated questions that this raises. So I want to thank you for coming on here and talking through this with me. Ken, a pleasure to see you again, a pleasure to talk to you again. Thank you for everything you do as the Deputy County Executive of Westchester County. It's got to be a very complicated job. It's a complicated organization. It's a complicated county. You run parks, you run health department, you run a bunch of very important things that make life kind of glued together for, you know, hundreds of thousands of people. So thank you for everything you do, Ken Jenkins, and thank you for coming on this show.
Well, thank you, Charlie, first, and all the best to Deborah, you and your family, right? And I hope everything's going well for you. And I'm happy to be here talking with you on the Red Blue podcast and you know, making sure that we're getting the things going back on. And again, happy to come back again.
Thank you, Ken. Talk to you next time. All right.
Have a great night.
So everybody, there you have it. This is Red Blue Talk. My channel's all about how politics and government impact people's lives. I would love it if you would click like, share, subscribe. You know how to do all that stuff. Tomorrow night we're going to have Damon Marr. He is a member of the Westchester County Board of Legislators. We're going to talk a little bit more about that voting machine issue, which I talked about with Ken at the end of this interview. I'll see you tomorrow night. Thanks, everybody. Good night.